Okay, all right, guys. Today we are going to talk a little bit about how to format your files, your Python files. What your assignments should kind of look like, and how you should spell things and capitalize them, and just some good overall code styling and formatting for your assignments. Every assignment in this class is going to have a few things that are common, and we're going to talk about some of those today. So the best way to do this, I think, is to um, let's just do a pretend assignment. So let's do an assignment, a pretend assignment called simple math, and this is going to it's going to ask the user whether they want to subtract or add, get two values from the user, and then respond appropriately. So if they say they want to add and they give a 2 and a 4, we'll respond back with an answer saying your answer is 6, that kind of thing. This is a really simple little pretend assignment, but it'll help you to understand, hopefully, how to format your code and what your functions should look like and that kind of a thing. So as I'm thinking about this assignment, I'm realizing that I'm going to have something that adds, something that subtracts. I'm going to have maybe some instructions I got to print. So that tells me that I'm going to have a few helper methods that do that kind of work. So let's just write those first. So let's write a function first called print instructions, if I can spell it right. It won't take any parameters. It's just going to print to the screen. And I'm going to use the three single quote, the multi-line print statement in Python with the three single quotes, which allow me to print multi-lines. And I'm going to say, welcome to the simple math program. Here we will let you either add or subtract two numbers. Okay. All right. So, and I'll put a return on there just for fun, so it looks nice, and then we'll do our subtract. So I'm gonna have a subtract two. Let's call it two numbers, and I'll have A and B, and then this will just return A minus B. And then I'll have the same type of thing for add two numbers, and it's going to take an A and a B, and it's going to return A plus B. Okay. Let's see here. I'm going to let Python help me with this, so it looks nicer. To convert that into single quotes. Okay. So there I have my helper methods. I have a method called print instruction. By the way, method and function are interchangeable. So I have a method called print instructions, I have a method called subtract two numbers, and I have a method called add two numbers. Okay, so now I need my coordinator. Every one of your programs, your assignments this year, is going to have a main function. And that main function is going to be your, I call him the coordinator. He doesn't do a whole lot of work, he just coordinates the work, okay? So he is going to call the print instructions method, and then he's going to ask the user if they want to add or subtract. So I'm going to dump that into a variable called user input, and I'm going to say that equals input. Would you like to add? And I'm going to ask them to enter a 1 for that, or subtract. And I'll ask them to enter a 2 for that. Okay. So here on line 21, I'm grabbing, I'm going to print to the screen this message. It'll have a little cursor at the end of it, and the user will type something, and they'll hit enter, and whenever they type and hit enter, will get dumped into this variable that I'm calling user input. And input is just a built-in function. We've talked about it in class, but Input is a built-in function in Python that just gives you that functionality. It prints something to the screen, and then it gives a cursor to the user. The user enters something, and they hit enter, and whatever they enter gets returned by this function. So it'll get assigned into this variable. Okay, so I'll have user input there, and then let's grab the first number. First number equals input. Please enter your first number. Oops. Okay. And then I'm going to do something similar for the second number. So I'm just going to copy and paste it and change the name here and change this word here. Okay. So now I'm grabbing the user input, I'm grabbing the first number, and I'm grabbing the second number. Now, input, if we hold control or command and hover over it, you'll see that it returns a string. This little arrow means what it returns, and it returns a string. So user input is going to be a 1, hopefully, or a 2. Hopefully, if the user does what they're supposed to, they'll enter a 1 or a 2, and that'll be a string. And that's fine. We can compare that. But for this and this, I'm going to be using those in math, so I need to convert those to an int. And so what I'll do is I'm going to wrap this input in an int cast, which will take whatever the input returns and it'll cast it as an int before it assigns it to these variables. So these variables are now going to be ints, and this one we'll just leave as a string. Okay, so at this point, let's do an if check. So if user input equals 1, then we know we're adding. So I'm going to say my answer equals add 2 numbers, and I'm just going to pass it my first number and my second number. Okay. Else, if it's not a 1, then we know we're subtracting. So I'm going to call my subtract helper and pass it both numbers again. Okay. So now I just need to print to the screen what the result of all that was. So I can say the answer to the problem you requested is, and then I'm going to use the .format instance method to help me out here, and I'm just going to dump answer into that string, and that's about it. We're done. The only other thing I need to do is call my main. Okay, so I know I just went through I just wrote this really quickly. I'm sure some of you are a little bit confused. Please don't be confused at this moment. Don't worry about anything that you're confused about. Just listen to what I'm trying to say here. If you don't understand what this line is doing, or if you don't understand what input is doing, or if you don't understand what ants is, or anything like that, don't worry about that for now. The main purpose of this YouTube video is to get you to understand how to format your assignment. Of course, it does matter that you understand how all this code works, and that'll come as you go throughout the class. But I want you to understand that every one of your assignments should have a main. That main function should be the only thing that's called from the gutter. Okay. Inside of main should just be things that coordinate. So here I'm just calling the print instructions, and then the print instruction is doing its thing, and then I'm interfacing with the user, and I'm grabbing some values from the user, and then I'm checking the value of that of what they typed in, and then I'm coordinating and assigning, dumping, delegating the work to these other two methods, whether they, depending on what the user chose, and then I'm printing out a quick message, and then I'm returning. Okay, the main function is not really doing anything really other than coordinating with the user and with other functions. That's the job of main. If your main is huge and big, that's usually a sign that you could be doing something better. Now, for the purposes of this class, it does not matter. We could put all of this stuff inside of main. We could, instead of, in fact, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal for us to say ants equals first number plus second number. Okay, that wouldn't have been that big of a deal, but the purpose of this video is I'm trying to get you to see that you should be delegating work to other functions, because as your assignments get bigger, and if you continue on and become a programmer, this is the kind of thing that you need to do. It makes your code more easier to. It makes it more easy to read. It makes it easier to debug when there's bugs. All kinds of things, because everybody does something specific, and this guy just has this job. This guy just has this job, and so forth. Let's also talk about CodeStyle a little bit. Always have spacing around operators, like here. I have a space minus space. It's not mandatory, but like I really don't need that return or this return, because main and print instructions don't return anything. However, I think it's good practice to have them there. It kind of bookends your function, makes it a little bit easier to scan through and see where all the functions are. Let's see what else. Okay, so you'll see that in this case, all of my functions are camel cased, and all of my variables are all the two-word variables, I have a underscore separating the two words like a space would do. Of course, I couldn't do that because Python can't differentiate between those two words. It thinks that those are two things, and it is two things. So I have to keep them connected in order for it to be a single variable. But I do it this way because it makes sense to me as I'm reading my code. If I came back to this code in a year or a couple months, I would very easily be able to tell my functions from my variables because of the way they're typed, because of the way they're spelled. Now, it doesn't mean you have to follow this code style. Some people would love just having it like that. Add two numbers, okay? And so you might have different code style. I will say this: never ever capitalize any function or variable name. Never. Don't ever do that. But besides that one rule, you can kind of name them however you want. Just please be consistent. So if you adopt a code style that's a certain way, just follow that code style through. Now, again, like I said with the main function, you will not get docked points if you don't follow a certain code style, if you're all jarbled and jungled and kind of messy. But it behooves you, it helps you, it's in your best interest to adopt some kind of a code style and be organized and have your code look clean. Always have spaces between your methods. Have spaces between your different chunks inside of your methods, just that kind of thing. Make your code look nice. Always have a space after a comma. Just that kind of stuff. You'll see that I have a space after my colons here, and that's because it looks nicer when you run it. So if I hit play here and it says welcome to the simple math. Oh, see, here's another thing. I don't like how this is so close together. So let's hit stop. And let's add a couple of new line characters right here so it looks a little bit nicer. There. Welcome to the simple math program. Here we will let you either add or subtract two numbers. Would you like to add or subtract? Now, if I put my cursor there, you see that I have a little space there, and that's because of that space right there. It's kind of nice. If I didn't have that space there, then the cursor would be right up against the colon. It wouldn't look as nice. So I say I want to add. My first number is 55. My second number is 45, and the answer to your probability request is 100. Let's make sure that my subtraction works. So if I entered 2 and I said 65 and 33, then my answer is 32, and that looks right. Okay? All right, so again, this is just a pretend assignment to kind of get you some information on how your programs should look, how your assignments should look. Every assignment should have a main. It should be the only thing called from the gutter. Everything else should be called from within main. And then you should try to break up the work as nicely as you can. Sometimes it's difficult to understand, where to delegate the work and what work to do in the main and what work to delegate. There's no right or wrong answer there. You won't get docked points if you do that wrong. Just try to do it. That's all. Just try to do it. Okay, I hope this is helpful, and I'll post this. Thanks.